Hello and good morning. I'm Angela Brown, and I'm here today on this Live with Impact episode. And I'm here with, guess what? Omuugn himself. I know, super excited. Today we are talking about emotions from the series, the Live with Impact series, which is the Insights and Wisdom of Omuugn. This is volume one, and today we are reading from pages 181 to pages 186. Now, if you have not picked up your copy already, it's not too late. You can pick up your copy. This is volume one, and this is part one of a two-part series. And both parts are out there, both available now. But one of the things that I really like about this series is that it breaks up every different topic by week. Okay, so you can spend a whole entire week with your organization focusing on one topic. It's going to make you a better leader. It's going to make you a better person. It's going to make you a better parent. Then the next week, you get to focus on something new. Last week, we talked about determination. Before that, we talked about common sense. We've talked about being present. We've talked about mindfulness. We've talked about a whole lot of things. And today, we're going to talk about emotions. Now, one of the cool things is nothing happens in any deal, business deal, parental deal, interaction between two people without emotions being present. So, are your emotions making you a mess and making you screw up and do stupid things? Or are you able to control them and manage the situations and the negotiations of your day to day life? How are your emotions affecting you? It's a really great topic. So, please help me welcome Omuugn. Today, we're unpacking emotions. How are you today, Omuugn?
I'm doing really well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a cool, rainy day in eastern Oregon. We've had almost a week of rain, so the skies are overcast, and we have to create our own sunshine from within during this particular time of year. But it is possible, and we're enjoying it.
You know, it's interesting because at this time of year, there are a lot of people who get seemingly depressed, and they call it SAD, SAD, which stands for seasonal affective disorder. And there are people that during the rainy seasons and it becomes winter and it's cold outside, they literally become sad and flustered because they don't have that sunshine, like you mentioned, from coming from within.
Well, that brings us to emotions. Um, Emotions are really part of an important aspect of who we are. We have our intellectual self, our emotional self, our physical self, and our spiritual self. And all of them are important, and we need to maximize all of them. And so we're not trying to suppress emotions, we're trying to put them in their proper perspective. And in all of those different areas, we mature, hopefully. And sometimes we see a person who has a large physical structure, and we assume that they have a large emotional structure, but that may not be the case at all.
Mhm.
Sometimes we have experiences when we're young, and those experiences stick us or fasten us in a place emotionally. And those things can plague us throughout our entire lives. And so we need to really understand what the function of emotions are so that we put them in their proper space. And so we can, over time, mature in that area. Because ideally, everyone will come out mature emotionally on the other end. Some people don't. Some people never mature emotionally. And so it's important to understand the different aspects of emotions. And that's what we'll try to do this morning.
So I want to back up for a second because I happen to know I know you very well. For those of you that are just joining us, those of you that are watching the replay, Omuugn happens to be my dad. I know, super cool. But we have 19. I have 19 brothers and sisters, and so as a father of 19, he had the opportunity on a day-to-day basis of dealing with not just a kid with emotional erraticism, but many kids in all different varying ages, different levels of maturity and different levels of experiences, and managing a whole entire series of emotions on any given day every day of raising a family. So I want to talk about that for a second because as a kid, there was a whole bunch of stuff that I was unaware of. But being the dad, tell me, how did you manage so many different emotions every single day and help everybody get along?
Wow, that is a big question.
I know. How'd
Um,
you do it?
at one time, we had 7 teenagers for 18 years straight. And at the same time, we had little toddlers and kids in diapers and the little tiny family. And then we had the children that were kind of in between those two stages. So there were a lot of emotional things happening all the time in our family. So I can honestly say that we weren't perfect, and that when you get in a situation that you're sort of new to, you have to learn along with everybody else. And so we had our share of mistakes, but we found that if we were consistent in teaching everyone things, that it helped everyone understand. My initial philosophy was to train the older children, and the younger children, as they came along, would see the older children hopefully behaving well, and much of the training would take place by observation. And I think that worked pretty well. For example, we didn't allow yelling and screaming and fighting in our home. If that began, we just quelched it in the very, very beginning. So even though we had a lot of children at home, our home is usually pretty quiet and organized. And if you don't sort of have an idea of what you want your environment to be, your environment can go out of control very, very easily. And we did that in a number of ways. For example, not allowing fighting or quarreling or yelling or screaming. We didn't allow a lot of television, and it would be so challenging in today's world with all of the gaming things going on and all of the electronic things that are available. I and children, um, it would be challenging to raise a child in today's environment. But I tried to control all of those things. We would watch television together, and we would select the shows very carefully. We didn't allow everyone to have a radio and all listen to all different kinds of things. We chose the music that we would listen to, and we listened to it as a family. And so I think those things sort of help to temper the emotional stability of everyone. Everyone sort of knew what to expect, and they knew what the systems were that were running in the home. There were job times and inspection times and different days of the week where you had your bath and you did certain hygiene uh, processes. And yeah, everything was sort of organized. And I think that really helped with the emotional stability of everyone.
I do know that there were some times where there was chaos, and it was not bad chaos, like people were fighting, but it would be like there would be something surprising happen, like, hey, we're in a hurry and someone has lost their shoes, or, um, the popcorn is popping and someone forgot to put the lid on the popcorn, the popper. And so now it's just popping all over the kitchen from the pan. So there were things like that that were like, whoa, let me see if I can hurry and fix this. And so how did you manage those? I'm going to call them anxious moments because there were anxious things happening and they could have been good or bad. Somebody spilled a gallon of milk. It's not ideal. Nobody planned for it. It was an accident, but we need to hurry and get that up. So how did you manage those kind of emotions? Because I know there are a lot of people that are in a reactive state where things just happen and then they react without having any sort of plan for how they're going to react when those moments hit.
I have a lot of stories I could tell. I remember I remember one time one of the small boys slipped in the mashed potatoes on the table and
What?
caused a big hullabaloo. And one time we were at church, and a lady came up to me and she said, "Do you know your little boy has different colored socks on?"
Mm.
And I said, "Did you notice that he has different shoes on? That his shoes don't match either." And we're lucky that we could find enough socks and shoes to put on him. It was just touch and go this morning.
Mm. That's
But
funny.
one of the things that I learned was that most everything that happens to us it's very temporary.
Mhm.
If someone slips in the mashed potatoes and falls on the table, you can clean it up and nobody was really hurt. It was a
Mhm.
little inconvenience, but so much in our lives will just pass and go on.
Mhm.
Uh, I think it was Marie Osmond who said, if you're going to look back at something and laugh, you might as well laugh while it's happening.
Mm.
And so that was kind of our attitude. Uh, don't get caught up in the moment. Just take life as it comes. Life is not going to be plan A all of the time.
Mhm.
And seldom is it plan B. If you have a big family like we had emergencies several times a day in different ways. I remember one day, my wife brought one of my little sons to me and said, "So and so has something stuck up his nose," and he had a habit of putting beans and chalk and all different kinds of things in his nose, kind
Like
of
it was a little pocket.
like it was a little storage area. So we learned not to get uptight over those issues. Those were just things that happened on a daily basis. Maybe they weren't that serious. And we didn't know things were stuck up his nose until we could smell something really foul and we didn't know where it was coming from.
Mhm.
And we isolated everyone and went through everyone and we traced it to his nose.
And I guess it had just, caught in his sinus cavity or something, and it just
He had a
started.
piece of chalk stuck in his sinus cavity.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so I got
That's
an
not
irrigation.
usually that's not usually an area that you check when you're checking to see if people are hygienically clean. Let's check up your nose.
Yeah, that took us by surprise. But I got an irrigation bottle and I went up through his other nostril and washed it out and we resolved that issue. But yeah, there are solutions to almost everything. And so a little common sense, a little patience, a little tolerance, just being kind of cool and laid back, and things are not going to upset me. I'm not going to rant and rave and swear and jump up and down and beat things with a stick. I learned early on that hitting things with a stick will never help,
Mhm.
unless it's unless it's a person. I'm just I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Um,
So
yeah,
I'm curious because growing up, and this is a true story, but growing up, I don't remember a time ever when you raised your voice and you yelled at us. So I'm curious, is that something that you did consciously? And is that something that you decided at an early age, hey, I'm gonna choose how I behave, and then nothing is gonna ruffle my feathers? Because I don't remember a time you ever yelling at us.
well, this could be a long story. Early on, I realized that my family was kind of like a little kingdom, and I decided what I wanted my kingdom to be. I actually sat down over a period of maybe 2 weeks, and I wrote out a family constitution
Mm.
when all of our meetings would be, what all of our responsibilities were, how our accountability would take place, how we interacted with other people and with other families. Our church program was in there, our study classes. Everything was really kind of mapped out as a family. We didn't fly by the seat of our pants at all, and so I think that helped. Sort of being organized and knowing how I wanted my family to be, and being able to look at all of the different aspects was a tremendous help in making the smaller decisions because I knew what the bigger picture was, the bigger program, and I realized what I was trying to accomplish. And those goals were always in the background, and everything that I did sort of funneled us toward those goals. And we weren't just flying by the seat of our pants and everything. And so
Were
that really
you
helped.
were you new to having a family, or was this several kids in that you built this family constitution?
It was early on. I think we had 2 children
Mm.
when I did the Constitution, and I was I was almost an only child. I had one half brother, and he was 5 years older than I was. So I didn't have a lot of experience with a big family. But my wife was one of 16 children, and she was the second oldest. And so I relied on her for a lot of insight into raising children and how to do things. She was the expert, and I was the student.
Did her
But I
family have a family constitution?
no,
Oh.
no.
And so did your creating a family constitution come from observation, seeing what a family of 16 looked like with a lack of a constitution?
Well, I did research on I probably don't want to get into it this morning, but I researched families. I did some research on how to put a family together.
Hmm.
And there were some people who had actually done that. And I ran onto some really, really good ideas. And so the idea of the family constitution and organizing that way wasn't originally my idea. I gathered that from research, and as I looked around, that seemed to be the best approach to a family that I could find.
Hmm.
And so I wanted to start out being organized and having an idea of what I was trying to accomplish, because having children was a totally new experience to me. I had never been around little people. I had never changed a diaper. I knew nothing about raising children. And so I started from scratch, and I tried to learn quickly and implement things that I thought were good principles. And many of them have turned out to be pretty good principles. If I were going to do it again, I would do it much the same way that I did before.
I think you did a phenomenal job. And I don't say that just because I'm one of the kids, but I say it because I watched you and the way that you handled the discipline and the way that you handled a wide range of emotions, from people behaving in a really phenomenal sort of way and then people behaving really badly. And I'm going to throw myself into that mix because I was a difficult teenager, and I wasn't in the sense that I was really rebellious, but I was rebellious in my head. And so my mother would ask me to do things and I would do like that, like, and it's just not a nice sound to be making to your mother. I did the rolling of my eyes, like, and I did like a little sound, which is not nice to be doing to your mother either. And it was my way of saying, I don't want to do whatever it is you're asking me to do. And now that I'm older, those behaviors are they're not polite. And not only are they not polite, but they make the person that's receiving them feel stupid and small. And that was not respectful. And I didn't do it for any other reason than I just wanted to be a teenager. I was just kind of a bratty teenager in my head. And I eventually ended up doing pretty much everything that she requested of me, but I did it with a bad attitude. And I'm sorry about that now. I didn't mean to make her life so difficult. In the wake of her being pregnant and having migraine headaches and things like that, she was asking for help, and then I would roll my eyes and I would stomp around a little bit, and I had bad emotions. And I feel bad now. I wish I could go back, and I would not do that the same. If I could turn the clock back, I would do it much differently so that I could just be more respectful of her. But you were very keen on trying to create an environment where we were aware of our own behaviors and our own emotions so that things could run more smoothly. And I appreciate that you were savvy enough to create a family constitution, because I know that having that many people under one roof, it is amazing how few fights there were and how few bickerings there were. And so, speak to us for a little bit, if you will, about parents who have kids that currently bicker and they're thinking about creating a family constitution. How would you put something like that together today so that moving forward there could be peace under one roof?
That's a big question, and I'm sure there are several different approaches to anything you're trying to accomplish. There are several different options that you can choose from. A lot of it depends on your spiritual background. In my view of things, there's a spiritual reality that underlies everything, and there are universal laws that operate, and there are foundational principles. And so, if you understand what those are and you start building your program around those things, everything else will sort of fall into place. If you don't really know what the principles are that govern your life, if you don't know what the universal laws are, then you really have no standard to judge things by, and you have no way to determine whether you're on the right path or whether you're being successful. There's just no way to gauge it unless you have a gauge to work from. And so you need to develop your own standards and your own insights. When we talked the week on common sense, we determined that common sense isn't common at all. And what we need to do is go to sound judgment, where the decisions that you make are based on things that are solid and secure. You put a foundation under things, and then things can sit on those foundations pretty solidly. If someone is screaming and yelling and you just tell them not to scream and yell, that doesn't really help the situation. I have a son who, with his family, if his children are bickering or yelling at each other, he will just sit down with them and say, okay, let's talk about this. Let's talk about why you're screaming. Uh, tell me what's happening. And he will bring them into a place where they're rational and they're able to see things from a different perspective. If someone took someone else's toy, he explains ownership and asking permission and how things should operate. And maybe if you're polite, this person will let you play with their toy after they're through with it, and you can have a turn. Whereas if you make them mad and angry, they probably won't. And so you will get further and accomplish more if you're nice to people rather than quarreling and fighting with them. And
And
I
that
thought
he
that
learned
was,
from you. That he learned from you. I specifically remember times where I misbehaved. And in our home growing up, we had a great big archway over a door. And hanging on the archway, there were nails. There was one nail for every person in the family. And there were smiley faces made out of cardboard. And they hung on those nails with our initials. And if we misbehaved during the day, instead of my mother punishing us, she turned our smiley over. It was kind of like a three-strike program where we would get our smiley turned over and then it became a frown. And I know when dad walked in from work, he would look at the smileys and the frown and he would say, Angela, there's a frowny face over your initial. Come, let's talk. And I remember one time he took me into his den and I sat inside a chair with this great big wingback, the big tall chair that dwarfed me. I'm this little person in this big leather chair. And he sat down on the ottoman in front of me and he looked me straight in the eye. And he said, Angela, you're a very bright little girl. And I'm curious to know what your reasons for your behavior were today. And I'm guessing he didn't even know what my behavior was. But he gave me the benefit of the doubt. With respect, he gave me a chance to express myself. And then he did something really unique and incredibly painful. He said, what do you think is a fair punishment? And I promised away the sun, the stars, and the moon. I said, oh, I'll pick rocks out of the garden. And we had to do that so that it wouldn't break the rototiller blades as we were gardening. And he said, and I said, and I'll wash out dirty diapers. We had these buckets of dirty diapers because we use cloth diapers for the toddlers. And he says, and I said, and I'll help with the dishes. And he said, and I think I just kept saying things until I felt like, okay, that's justifiable for the punishment that I deserved. And he said something that was really interesting. He said, your mother needs your help. And being one of the older kids in the family, she's relying on you. Then he asked me an interesting question. It was kind of a psychological punishment, if you will. Your mother's relying on you for help. Can I also rely on you for help? And I was like, whoa. So we talk about common sense, but in this particular moment, I was punished in a psychological sort of way. I was able to keep my dignity. I was able to, in a respectful sort of way, have a conversation with somebody that wasn't present when I was misbehaving. And he was able to let me keep my, hey, what's happening here? And are you part of the problem or are you part of the solution? Well, I was part of the problem. But what he gave me was the courage and the ownership to say I can also be part of the solution. So yeah, I do know my brother that does that with his kids, but he learned that directly from you, Omuugn. So I want to give you a hands up for teaching us that. It's a really interesting way to punish someone, and it is a really interesting. I'm going to call it a tag along that has taken me through the rest of my life because that is now the same approach that I use with my employees when my employees misbehave, and I'm trying to let them in a dignified sort of way say, hey, I also can be part of the solution.
Yeah, a little insight into that story. We actually had 3 nails vertically, and I was the disciplinarian in the family. I didn't want to put my wife into a situation where, see, we had homeschool, which added another whole dimension to the interactions that we had with each other. And I didn't want my wife to have to be the teacher and the disciplinarian. And so I took on the responsibility of being the disciplinarian in the family. And so we had 3 nails vertically over each name. And if someone misbehaved, we allowed them to misbehave because they were children and they hadn't matured yet in every way. So if someone was doing something that was contrary to our policies, my wife would put their smiley up a nail. And then if they misbehaved again, or if they would not stop misbehaving, she would put it up another nail. And there were only 3 nails. When your smiley was up on the 3rd nail, you were in sort of a touchy situation because the next step was to turn your smiley over to the frowny face.
3 strikes and you're out.
3 strikes and you're out. And if she turned the smiley over, then when I came home from work, you met with me as the disciplinarian. And so I tried to take that responsibility off of my wife, which I think was a good program. But anyway, yeah, we tried to teach principles instead of just punishing people for misbehaving according to our definition of misbehaving.
I want to throw something out as well, not to just talk about punishment and discipline, but because the emotions are so charged when there's a discipline situation. And I know lots of parents have grounding. You're grounded, go to your room, I'm taking away your electronics or whatever. And one of the interesting things about being raised in a large family was when we were disciplined, and we got disciplined for a variety of different things. I mean, there are a whole bunch of ways you can screw up as a kid. But one of them was if you were not doing your job properly, or if your room wasn't tidy, or you didn't make your bed, or whatever. Um, there was a rolling of the dice. And so, if you will you tell us about the rolling of the dice and the punishments and how that process worked? Because it was a very unique way to get punished in a sense that it was kind of like everyone gather around, we're going to roll the dice, and there are 5 punishments, lucky 6, no punishment at all. But share with us what that was, because that was really unique and inventive.
Oh, we tried all kinds of different things. Yeah, we had different punishments for each number on the die. And so sometimes, and this was a stage, we didn't do this all of the time, but this was a stage that we tried to see if it would work. And you'd roll the die, and whatever number came up, that would be your punishment, which was usually another job or something that would impinge on your time. and your free agency, I guess. Another thing that we used to use was when everything has been outlawed now because it's dangerous. We let our children grow up in a world that is safe. But when I was young and when you were young, they had what were called jack balls, where you'd play. You had a little ball and a bunch of jacks, and you'd throw the ball up, and you had to pick up jacks and then catch the ball, and it was a little game. Those things are dangerous now because a kid might swallow one of the jacks, which would be a really bad decision. But anyway, if we were in a meeting, like if we went to church and the kids were talking and interrupting at church, one of the disciplines was to take the jack ball. And I had like 3 or 4 jack balls in my pocket. They had to put the jack ball in their mouth for the rest of the meeting. And you can't talk very well if you have a jack ball in your mouth.
Imagine a jawbreaker, a really big jawbreaker that you put in your mouth, and your mouth is kind of held open. That's kind of like what it was, but it was made of rubber, so you could actually chew on it if you wanted to. And I say this because I experienced it one time. I was whispering in church, and I got the finger, like, don't be doing that. And then I still was whispering with my brother, and that was not approved. So when I got home, I had to put the little ball in my mouth and sit there quietly while I was thinking about not talking in church. And I want to preface this for those that are watching or watching the replay, because we always sat on the front row of church so that the people that were sitting up on the podium or up on the stand could look down and they could watch us behaving, and if we misbehaved, and also because we were little, and then we could see what was happening up there. And so if we were sitting there on the front row and we were whispering or whatever, we were not being a good example to other children that were sitting in the other pews. So we were supposed to sit there and be quiet, fold our arms, and be reverent. And that was not always easy for a tiny child sitting through a really boring church service.
I cannot tell you how many times people came up to me and said, "How do you do it? How can all of your children sit there so quietly and not disturb?" And they didn't realize that there were little programs going on in the background that kind of controlled.
There's a jack ball that goes in their mouth if they whisper during the service.
We tried everything. I mean, we have a lot of rich experience that we could get into, but
I want to highlight something though, and I want to stop for a second, because you were talking about, and this is such a unique concept that I want to hang on to it for a second. Creating the family constitution, because there are a lot of families that do fly by the seat of their pants. They get pregnant, they have kids, and then they're like, oh, wow, look, we have kids. What comes next? And people raise families, and there never is a plan. And even before, and I think it's because I was brought up that there was a plan. Like, hey, this is on purpose. We're living a life, raising a family on purpose. We're doing this intentionally. We're not just drifting aimlessly through our lives, but we're living intentionally. And I know that when I got married and we didn't have any kids, we created a family constitution, and we created alignment meetings and built them into our weekly schedule, so that every single Tuesday, when my husband had his day off, we would sit down as a family. And right now it was just the two of us because we just got married, but we would go over our finances, and we would go over our family relationships. And we had a prayer list, somebody we were going to pray for. We didn't have to know what was going on in that person's life. But if we want to send them positive vibes and we want to pray for these people this week, who goes on our prayer list? And then we want to talk about different things in our life, like our exercise program and our diet and the things that we're working on together. We want to talk about our finances, like what can we afford and what do we need to stay away from? Do we need to pick up extra jobs? Are we able to afford a vacation? There were things like that that were able to happen because every single Tuesday we sat down and we had those alignment meetings. So I want to commend you for leading by example, because we were able to control the emotions in our home. And I know, like we've mentioned many times on this show, how many marriages end in divorce. But my marriage has been one until like recently, in the last couple of weeks, when we started the moving process, and it became a little fussy. But our whole entire marriage has been one of no fights and of mutual respect and of people working together because we want the same kind of goals. And I think that comes from, literally, I think that comes from having a program where you sit down and you outline what does your family look like? And then how are we going to behave when there are tense moments? And so I really commend you for teaching me that, because I've been able to use that in my own marriage and my own lifestyle. And we celebrate 22 years here in a couple months. So it's not the 58 years that you're celebrating this year, but that's a really long time in some marriages. So I really commend you for that.
Well, it always helps to know where you're going and what you're trying to accomplish. It's really good to have long-term goals that you're trying to reach, and everything is built around those. Your short-term goals should be in alignment with your long-term goals. And yeah, the more organized we are, the better things are going to turn out. Uh, Life has so many plan Bs and plan Cs and disruptions and chaos. Our country is going through a period of turmoil right now, where there's a lot of polarizing going on in different factions. Uh, there's a lot of common sense that is not being utilized at all. And so the more of us who do that, who organize our lives and have standards and ways to be accountable for our responsibilities, it adds to a structure that impacts our country even. So yeah, that really helps.
Do you remember
One
those
thing,
little tiny egg-shaped Weeble people? Weeble people wobble, but they don't fall down. I remember so many times I've gone back to that, and you talk about the plan B. Life is a series of plan Bs. I keep thinking to myself, and I can't tell you on how many occasions I've just said to myself, I'm a little Weeble people right now. I just got to wobble, but I won't fall down. You know what I mean?
one thing that I would like to say about emotions is that we all have a belief system. Everyone has their own belief system, and no two belief systems are the same. And so we need to be intimately aware of what our own belief system is. For example, some people are afraid of spiders, some people are afraid of snakes, some people are afraid of speaking in front of other people. Or if you look at yourself, you'll find a lot of ways in which you are, and we could say, emotionally unstable, because in certain situations, those situations, whatever they might be, spiders or snakes or people, will totally disrupt our functioning. And so we need to understand what our own belief system is and realize that some of the aspects of our belief system are not accurate at all. We've picked up maybe a spider scared us when we were a little tiny kid. Or maybe we were in the house and our mom saw a spider and she screamed and jumped up on a chair. And so we became afraid of spiders because we observed our mom being afraid of spiders. All different kinds of situations exist. So if we don't look at our own belief system, then a lot of things can impact the way we live and interact with other people in a negative way. And so over time, we build habits, and some of our habits are negative habits and some are positive habits. But we need to realize that sometimes we bother people and we're not aware of it because we habitually do something that is bothersome to someone else. So being emotionally stable is going through a lot of those experiences mentally. We don't have to actually go touch a spider to prove that we're not afraid of spiders. We can go through things in our mind and create scenarios and how we would respond to those situations. For example, if someone comes up and yells at you, if they yell at you, or if they're agitated at you, how would you respond to that? Do you yell back? Do you react instead of proact? A lot of times people scream at us not because we've done anything, but because maybe they're constipated, or maybe they have some medical problem that we're not aware of, or they're going through a stressful situation and they don't know how to really control their own emotions, and they take it out on us because we're the closest person around. So we need to be tolerant of other people and realize that people are in all different kinds of situations, and not everyone is emotionally mature and stable. So we have to do that for ourselves. We have to say, I am going to mature emotionally. And if I'm in this kind of a situation, this will be my response. Instead of yelling at someone, my response is going to be, I'm going to be quiet and listen to them and see if I can empathetically interact with them and try to figure out what's bothering them, because I don't think I've done anything. Or maybe I have a bad habit that's bothering them and that was the trigger. Whatever it is, if you go to a place where you begin to logically process what's happening, you'll come out with a much, much better situation. It's never a good idea to approach conflict with conflict, because that accelerates, it expands the conflict. What you want to do is take the energy away from the conflict. In fact, emotions is energy in motion. Energy in motion. And so you have to be aware of how energy is moving. And this is really an important idea. We put energy into things that we're going to do. Everything we do takes energy. And so there's an aspect of emotions that involves our putting energy into things. But every action has an equal and opposite reaction. That's one of the foundational principles. So emotions are, if you will, a circuit, like an electrical circuit. You put emotions into things, and you're going to get a feedback, which is an emotion. And that completes the circuit. And sometimes when you interact with people and they're emotionally upset, they're yelling or screaming, or maybe they've gone to anger or depression or whatever it might be, you're looking at their circuit completing. And it didn't complete in an idealistic way. And so we need to be tolerant and look at situations and evaluate based on our understanding. And emotions that we're feeling is our feedback. We put emotions into the decisions that we make, and we will get a feedback emotionally of whether or not our decision was the right decision. If you do something and then you feel joyous, you feel happy, you feel like that circuit completed in the way that you preferred, then it was probably a good decision. But if you make a decision, or you do something, or you say something, and you feel disturbed, or you feel depressed or unsettled, your emotions are telling you that that probably wasn't the best idea. That wasn't the best way for this situation. And so if we look at emotions, our emotions are not our brain. They were never designed to be our brain. Our intellect is a separate thing. And we're supposed to make our decisions based on our intellect, making sound judgments. And then our emotions are a feedback to tell us if we've done that successfully. Some people make their decisions out of their emotions, and our emotions were never designed to be our brain. And
so if I go back for a second, a minute ago, you said many people react because they're fueling the energy of the moment with more energy. And so if there's a negative emotion and they're just approaching it with conflict, it's like a fire. They've just added fuel to it, and now it's even bigger. Do you have any suggestions? And I know you probably do because you've mastered the art, but do you have any suggestions for people that in a reactive state, their normal go-to is to fuel those fires with more negative energy?
well, the first step is to become aware. If you're not aware of your behavior, if you're just acting impulsively, reacting to your emotions, then you're not going to mature emotionally. And you will, for example, some people have an anger management problem. That's the way their belief system is. That's the habit that they have formed. And so if they don't become aware that that's the way they respond to things, then they will just continue to do that, and the maturation will never take place. So awareness is the first key. You have to want to be a better person. You have to want to work on your traits and characteristics so that you become the best version of yourself. And so if you don't identify those areas in your life, then you don't know what to work on. The reason that I wrote the books is because I realized that we were not a singularity, but we were a compilation of a lot of different traits and characteristics. And sometimes we don't take the time to look at each one and say, how am I in this area? And the reason that I wrote the book was I took the scriptures and the wisdom literature that has been passed down through the ages. and if you take something like communication, there's really a proper way to communicate. And you don't have to recreate the wheel. People have already told us how you communicate effectively. The same thing with our emotions. You don't have to recreate the wheel. We know how our emotions should be, as either putting energy into something or evaluating the feedback from that decision that we've made. And so if we learn those principles, it puts us in a different place, because the more characteristics we identify and how they work and how they should work and how to evaluate them and how to, for example, in my book, I didn't use any examples in my book because I wanted the person reading the book to use their own life as the examples. Mm-hmm. So if you approach something like emotions, you would take your own life. How do I interact with my spouse? How do I interact with my children? How do I interact with my extended family or my friends or my club or my church or whatever it might be? You would use your own life as all of the examples for this principle. Mm-hmm. And if we were to do that, then one principle, one characteristic at a time, we would become a better person.
I know, for example, when and the year was 1994, I decided I was going to deal with my own anger management. And I grew up with no anger issues. And it wasn't until I fell in love with the wrong guy that then he and I fought all the time. And I'd never fought before, and I didn't actually know how to fight. And so he taught me how to fight, which is kind of like back and forth. It wasn't beautiful at all. It was actually really annoying and mean spirited. And in fact, I remember bringing him home, and as we hopped off the airplane, I was going to introduce him to be my fiance. And I remember you said, "You are not allowed to marry my daughter." First, hello, how you doing? That was your first words out of the mouth. And I was like, whoa. But we did. We bickered all the time, and we were both miserable. I don't know why we were going to get married. It's just not a good fit. And you were right. You were right. I don't think I told you at the time, like, you're right, Dad. That's a bad choice. But I'm going to tell you now, you were absolutely right. But then I bickered. I knew how to fight. I was yelling and unkind. And in 1994, I had a moment where I misbehaved. And I realized that I had the capacity to be really mean and unkind. And I decided in that moment, I don't prefer that. I don't want to live like that. And I wondered in this moment, I had this fantastical wonder. I wonder if I can go 1 year without getting upset. And so I promised myself I'm going to go for 1 year and I'm not going to get upset. I'm not going to lash out. I'm not going to argue with anyone. I'm not going to bicker. I'm not going to fight for 1 year. Get ready, get set, go. And I didn't know what that looked like, but I became like a puppet show, like a puppet master. Like what I'm seeing, I'm watching it. I'm not going to get emotionally involved. I'm just going to watch it. But I had, like you said, people fuel these fires with extra energy. I had all this extra energy because when people would make me upset, I now know what that feels like. And I now know how to fight, like, "Rah!" But I'm not going to do that. So I learned to put on a pair of jogging shoes and I would get out the door and I would go run and I would run as hard as fast as I could to try to burn off that energy without directing it at another human. So that in a respectful way, when I came back to the conversation or to the relationship was still intact. So that I could burn off all of that angst on the pavement and not take it out on another human. And it did not happen naturally, and it did not happen with common sense, and it did not happen in an organic sort of way. It was a conscious decision like, "Oh my goodness, I'm starting to feel my blood boiling." And I didn't always recognize it. And so I got a heart monitor, and now we wear the Fitbit. But every time my heart would reach a certain level, it would start beeping. And that was my signal that you better get out and go running it right now because otherwise you're going to do something that is going to take a long time repairing those broken relationships if you lash out. Don't lash out, go running. And so for me, it was a conscious anger management choice. I'm going to get out and I'm going to burn it out on the pavement. And when I come back and I'm logical, then I will be nice to the person that's in front of me and we can have a conversation like two grown adults. It was the
Yeah,
longest year of my life. Oh, it was the longest year of my life.
well, you bring up an important aspect that we really should touch on, and that is how our emotions relate to our health.
Mm,
Um, for example, a lot of the emotional reactions that we have are chemical reactions, whether in our bodies there is melatonin or serotonin, whether our hormones are accurate, whether the enzymes are whatever. And so you get into the area of nutrition and making certain that you have all of the minerals and the vitamins that your body needs, because a lot of our emotions are simply chemical reactions.
mm.
And under certain situations, like if we're under stress, our body is going to produce cortisol or adrenaline. And those chemicals are designed to help us react properly in certain situations. But if our life is just full of stress, we have cortisol all of the time. We have adrenaline all of the time. And those things are really the forerunners of chronic illness. And a lot of times we lose our vitality, we lose, it might be arthritic conditions, we have pain here and there. If we have an effect, there's always a cause and there's an effect. And whatever you're experiencing is the effect.
Mm.
If you're happy, if you're healthy, if you're able to go out and just run, or if you get winded, if you're not flexible, if you're overweight, if if you have some chronic condition like toenail fungus or whatever it might be, constipation. I say constipation because
It's
it's
uncomfortable.
well, a lot of people really are constipated, and a lot of people are frustrated because they're constipated.
Are
And
you talking in a physical or a metaphorical sense?
I'm talking in a physical sense.
Oh, okay.
If your system is all clean and everything is working like it should, you feel better. And if things begin to block up in you, it blocks up your emotions also. There's not a free flow of energy through your body, through your system. Our systems are all designed to work a certain way. The digestive system, the eliminative system, the neurological functioning. I mean, there's so many systems that have to operate accurately for us to really feel well.
Mm.
And so there's an aspect of our lives that we should really be concerned about: our diet, our nutrition, to make certain that we are putting the building blocks into our physical construct so that we feel well. Because all of those things like serotonin and all of those chemical things, our liver, for example, has over 450 different functions, producing enzymes and bile and all kinds of things that are going on. And every one of our organs does several different things. And we're going to be cross or irritable or emotionally unstable if we don't take care of ourselves. And like you say, getting out and just running, the exercise, the movement of your body does wonders to make you feel better. Our body is designed to move and to
Well, and
exercise.
one of the things that's really important that I didn't realize at the time is when you get out and you go running, you're not only asking oxygen to now circulate through your whole entire body, but blood circulates through your whole entire body as well. And our lymph system, which builds our immune system, doesn't have a pump like the heart does. It's relying on the movement that you give it. And so if you get out and you create movement, all of a sudden there's this domino effect of health and wellness in your body. And it's really hard to be angry with someone when you feel fantastic. When you come back from your run as hard as you ran, you come back and you're in a creative sort of way. You have endorphins that have kicked in. You feel fantastic, and now you're in a better position to negotiate whatever it was that made you cross in the first place.
Yeah, health will really assist our emotions. And the healthier you are, you're in a better position to be emotionally stable and in control of all of the things that are going on around you all of the time.
Tell us
Life
if
is
I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm
I was going to
sorry.
say life is challenging. Every day we have challenges that we have to deal with. And so we need to be strong and flexible and resilient and have a lot of qualities to deal with all of the things that are happening around us. And there are a lot of people around us who are going through all kinds of things that we need to be tolerant. And sometimes we need to just stop and we need to learn how to breathe properly, how to control what's happening inside of us through our breath and through our thoughts. And you brought up something that also I think is really important, and that is our attitude. We can choose to have a good attitude. And if you have a really good attitude and if you're positive, it's harder to be emotionally unstable because you've already chosen to be happy and to be positive no matter what's going on. And so that's one of the barometers that keep us solidly in the place where we want to be. I'm going to be positive today, and no matter what happens, I'm going to approach it with an optimistic attitude. If I have problems, I'm going to go through the problems. I'm going to come out on the other end. It's not the end of the world. It's just a little temporary thing I have to go through. So if we choose to have a good, solid, happy attitude, that makes all the difference in the world.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. I was going to ask, and then you answered the question anyway about the breathing. And I think breathing is a really great way, natural, completely free, to calm down. I find myself when I get really flustered and I'm in a moment where I can't escape and go running, that if I stop and I slow my breathing down and I take really slow, deep breaths, I can calm myself down enough that I can not act stupid and do what I call a dumb rookie move, where I do something that is reactive in the moment that I'm later going to regret. So sometimes I just tell myself literally breathe, slow down and breathe. Just kind of step away, slow down, breathe. You got this, you know?
Well, the takeaway from our session today, the important one is that we need to control our emotions. We don't want our emotions to control us. And so we need to decide what kind of an attitude we're going to have, how we're going to solve problems, how we're going to deal with things that come into our lives that are not plan A, things that happen. You get a phone call and all of a sudden your day is going in a different direction. Some emergency, someone else has an emergency. How are you going to respond to it? We talked about structures in spaces. In other words, you have an environment that would be the environment that you would prefer to be in. And you can always change the structures in those environments to be more what you would prefer. And so We need to take control of our lives and not let our emotions control us. We need to be emotionally mature, and we have to have a way to determine whether or not we are. If we have anger management problems, if we have frustrations, depression, if energy flows in ways that we do not prefer, we are not emotionally mature. And we need to recognize that and be aware of it and take programmed steps to overcome those things and to put our life in order so that we're happy and resilient and fun to be around.
What a great way to end this conversation. And I'm so sad it's already over. I love this. You guys, for those of you that are watching or joining us on the replay, this is the Insights and Wisdom of Omuugn. We are on volume 1, and this is volume 1 of 2 volumes. The first one takes us through a whole bunch of different topics and ideas that help us become better people and better families, better business people, better humans. So if you haven't already, pick up your copy. Join us again next time when we're going to be talking about encouragement and how we can use encouragement in our own lives to become better and how we can use it to better the lives of other people. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, Omuugn, for sharing with us your insights and your wisdom. Until we see you again, please live a life of impact.
Thank you.